The smell reached her before the sound did. Frankie Lang had been on the ramp at Easton Field for 6 winters, long enough that her nose had become a kind of instrument. She didn't think about diesel from the tugs, hot brakes, the green wet of cut grass past the fence in summer, the particular cold metal nothing of a January dawn like this one. Jetay had its own signature in all that, oily and faintly sweet, and it belonged in certain places and not in others. It belonged in the truck and the wing tanks and on the rag in her back pocket. It did not belong drifting low across open tarmac at 6:40 in the morning, riding a quartering breeze off the river. She stopped walking. The big Gulfstream sat at the end of the line, nose out, lit up from inside like a hotel lobby, its auxiliary power unit running with that high steady whine that means a flight crew is awake and wants their cabin warm. Catering had come and gone. The fuel truck was already pulling away toward the farm, which meant somebody had topped it off, and somebody had pulled the morning samples, and the airplane was nearly ready to take a man she'd never met somewhere she'd never been. The smell was coming from under its left wing. "Bryce," she keyed her radio without taking her eyes off the wing. "Bryce, you copy?" A crackle. "Go for Bryce." He sounded like a kid who'd been awake 40 minutes and resented every one of them. "You sumped the Gulfstream this morning." "The 650, spot 11. "Yeah, why?" "Stand by." She was already walking, faster now, the soles of her boots loud on the cold concrete, and as she came around the wingtip she saw it. A dark sheen spreading out from beneath the inboard section, a slick the size of a welcome mat and growing, catching the apron lights in long, oily rainbows, and at the low point of the wing, a steady glitter of drips, one after another, fuel coming out of the airplane and onto the ground in a thin, bright thread that did not stop. Her stomach went cold in the particular way it had learned to in the Navy, on a carrier deck, where a thing like this could take the skin off 40 people. The quick drain valve. The little spring-loaded valve you push up to take a fuel sample, the one that's supposed to snap shut and seat the second you let go. It hadn't seated. It was hung open a hair, a piece of grit, a tired spring, a thumb that didn't hold it square, and the wing was emptying itself one patient drop at a time onto a ramp where, 40 feet away, the APU was breathing its exhaust out the tail at a temperature that did not care what fuel cost or who was waiting. The breeze pushed the smell at her again, thicker now. Vapor. The liquid was the easy part. Vapor was what killed you. Vapor pooled low and went looking for something hot, and there was something hot, and the wind was making the introductions. "Bryce," her voice had changed and she heard it change. "Get the captain. Tell him shut the APU down now, not in a minute now. We've got a fuel leak under the left wing, the inboard drains hung open. And call the tower, roll the fire crew. Move." "Are you sure? They're about to." "Move, Bryce." She broke into a run toward the air stair. There was a man at the bottom of the steps she hadn't clocked from across the ramp, and he turned to meet her with the unhurried squareness of someone who'd been paid to be a wall. Big, gray suit that fit him too well to be cheap, an earpiece, a stillness in the shoulders. He put one hand up, palm out, and the hand alone was the size of a dinner plate. "We're good here," he said, not unkind, just final, the voice of a man closing a door. "You're not." She tried to go around him and the wall moved with her, easy, like he'd done it 10,000 times. "There's a fuel leak. That airplane's dumping jetay onto the ramp and the APU's running. I need to get to the cockpit or I need somebody to shut it down. I don't care which, but it has to be right now." "Ma'am." His eyes did a thing she'd seen 100 times in 6 winters, the flick down to the reflective vest, the scuffed boots, the radio, the read of her in half a second and the filing of her under a heading that did not require listening. "Mr. Voss has a hard departure. The aircraft's been checked. You need to step back behind the line." "I am the check. I work here." "That's my ramp." She pointed past him at the spreading slick, which any fool could see, which he did not turn to look at. "Look at the ground, look. That's not water, smell it." He didn't look. He'd been trained, she understood later, to keep his eyes on threats, and the threat his training had identified was a small, angry woman in a vest who would not stop moving toward his principal. He took her by the upper arm, not a grab, a guide, the practiced grip of someone who moved people for a living, and turned her bodily back toward the line, and his voice stayed level the whole time, which was somehow worse than shouting. "You're going to walk with me," he said, "back behind the line, and you're going to do it now." "There's a kid's drawing in my locker," Frankie said, which made no sense to him and perfect sense to her, the thing her mind reached for when it needed to not panic, a crayon Gulfstream with the windows too big, from Jonah in letters that ran downhill, the boy who would have no mother to pick him up from Mrs. Adamy's at 3 if this airplane lit off while she let a man in a good suit walk her politely away from it. "Let go of my arm. People are going to die. Do you understand the words? Fuel. Fire, the thing your job is supposed to be about. Let * go." A second man had come down the air stair, mid-rush, phone in hand, the particular charged impatience of someone whose morning was a chain of dominoes already falling. Lean, expensive haircut, a watch he kept glancing at like it owed him money. This would be Voss. He took in the tableau, his man, the woman, the vest, and made the calculation rich men make about scenes near their schedules. "Wade, what is this?" "Ramp employee, sir. Agitated, I've got it." "He doesn't have it." Frankie stopped fighting the grip, because fighting it was spending seconds she didn't have, and pivoted everything into the only thing left, which was words aimed at the one man who could end this with a sentence. "Mr. Voss, your airplane is leaking fuel onto the ground under the left wing." The drain valve didn't close after the morning sample. The APU exhaust is 40 feet from a vapor cloud, and the wind's carrying it the wrong way. If somebody doesn't shut that APU down in the next minute, your hard departure is going to be a fireball, and I will lose my job either way, so I promise you I'm not doing this for fun. Voss looked at her. For 1/2 second something in his face wavered. She'd learned he wasn't stupid. That was never his problem. And then his phone buzzed and the watch caught his eye and the dominoes pulled him back. "Wade, handle it. I need wheels up." He turned for the steps. "And find out who let her near the aircraft." "Sir," Frankie started, and Wade's grip firmed, and she understood with a horrible clarity that she had run out of people to convince and was about to be walked, gently and professionally, to the exact distance from which she would watch it happen. So she stopped trying to convince anyone. She drove her boot heel down onto the top of Wade's foot with everything 6 winters of standing on concrete had put into her legs, and when his grip loosened by the inch that bought her, she tore free and ran not toward the cockpit. She'd given up on the cockpit, but under the wing, into the smell, to the source. "Hey," Wade's voice behind her and footsteps, but she was small and quick, and she was already down on one knee in the cold slick of spilled fuel, soaking through her trousers, her hand finding the inboard drain by feel because she'd touched 1,000 of them, the little valve still weeping its bright thread. And she did the thing the valve was begging someone to do, pushed it up hard, square, the way you're supposed to, and felt the grit shift, and let it snap home. The thread of fuel stopped. Just like that, a drip, another, nothing. The wing held its breath. But the slick was still on the ground, the vapor still in the air, the APU still running and screaming 40 feet away, and stopping the leak wasn't the same as stopping the danger. She came up out of her crouch and turned, and there was Wade almost on her, and behind him faces had started appearing. The 2 pilots at the cabin door now, drawn by the radio chatter, and a fuel man frozen by the truck, and Bryce, white, with his own radio still in his hand. "Captain," Frankie put everything left into it, both arms up, the unmistakable cross-end cut of "shut it down." "Shut the APU down. You've got a fuel spill under the left wing. Shut it down and get your people off now. Downwind sides clear." For one terrible stretch nobody moved, the way nobody ever moves in the first second, the second where the brain argues with the eyes. Then the older of the 2 pilots, gray mustache, the calm of 30,000 hours, looked down at the ground beneath his airplane, and saw the rainbow sheen spreading out from the wing like something alive, and Frankie watched the argument end on his face. He turned and was gone into the cockpit, and 3 seconds later the APU's scream wound down the scale and died, and the only sounds left on the ramp were the wind, and a siren starting up somewhere across the field, and Wade Mullins breathing hard a foot away from her with an expression that had not yet decided what it was going to be. The fire crew foamed the ramp. The airplane didn't go anywhere that morning or the next. Voss took a charter out of the regional terminal 8 hours later in a worse mood and a worse airplane, and made his deal anyway, she heard, because men like Voss always make the deal. She didn't see any of the part she expected to see, which was the part where everyone realized she'd been right and felt bad. People don't work like that, not right away. What she got instead was 3 hours in the FBO's little conference room with a styrofoam cup of coffee going cold, while men in different uniforms asked her the same questions in different orders, and her boss, Holly's, standing in the corner with his arms crossed not looking at her, because she'd assaulted a client's security contractor. That was the word that kept coming up, assaulted for the foot, and there was video, and the client was important. And the FBO did not survive on the goodwill of important clients by employing women who stomped on their bodyguards. "You stomped on his foot," Holly said, when the uniforms had filed out, in the flat voice of a man who liked her and was about to have to do something he didn't want to. "He wouldn't let go of my arm. There were other ways too." "There were 40 seconds, Hollies. I counted them. I've been counting that exact kind of seconds since I was 19 on a flight deck, and I'm telling you there were 40 of them and no other ways." She put the cold coffee down. "Pull the drain. The inboard left quick drain on that 650. Pull it and bench it and tell me it's seated clean. If it's seated clean, fire me, I'll go quiet. If it was hung open, you can keep the speech." Hollies looked at her a long moment. Then he left without a word, and she sat alone in the little room with the crayon Gulfstream she'd been thinking about, somewhere across the field in her locker, windows too big, from Jonah, running downhill. It was hung open. A piece of safety wire, it turned out, a tiny shaving of it left behind by whoever had last serviced the valve, sitting in the seat just so, invisible until you had the thing in your hand under a light. Bryce had pushed the drain for his sample the way he always did, fast with his thumb, and it had felt like it closed, and it hadn't, and it had been weeping ever since, and on a calm day it might have just made a puddle and stained the ramp and been mopped up by noon. It hadn't been a calm day. The wind had been wrong. The APU had been running. The man in the good suit had been very good at his job, which was keeping people away from his principal, and not good at all at the only thing that actually mattered that morning, which was looking at the ground. Bryce found her by the trucks that afternoon after, and he couldn't quite meet her eyes, and what he said was, "I always push it with my thumb. Everybody pushes it with their thumb." "I know. You don't even, you do it the same way." I know, Bryce, she did know. It wasn't his fault, not really, not the way Blame likes to be clean. It was a sliver of wire and a windy morning and 100 ordinary thumbs, and the only difference between an ordinary morning and a funeral had been a nose 6 winters old and a woman willing to lose her job over what it told her. "Hey, look at me. You called the captain when I told you to. You rolled the trucks. When it counted, you moved. That's the part you keep. The rest of it, the thumb, that's all of us. Don't carry it." He nodded, jerky, and didn't carry it, or carried it less, and that was as much as she could do for him. Voss came back 4 days later. She knew he would, the way you know weather. Men like him don't leave a thing unaccounted for. It offends their sense of the ledger. He came into the FBO in a different suit with no Wade in sight, and he found her in the equipment bay checking a tug that didn't need checking, and he stood at the edge of the bay with his hands in his pockets like a man who had practiced being casual in the car. "They told me your name's Francis." "Frankie." "Frankie," he nodded, filing it. "I read the report, the wire." "The valve." He looked at the tug, at the tools, at anything but her, which she recognized, because pride is the same in a man with a jet as in a kid by the fuel trucks. I told my man to handle it. I told him to find out who let you near my airplane. A pause that cost him something. You were the only person on that ramp doing your actual job, including me. You had a deal. I had a deal. A short breath that wasn't quite a laugh. I've built a whole life on the idea that the important thing is always the next thing. The flight, the deal, the wheels up time. And a woman in a vest told me my airplane was on fire, and I told my bodyguard to handle it because the smell of jet fuel was less real to me than my calendar. He finally looked at her. He had tired eyes under the haircut. That's a thing I'm going to be thinking about for a while. Frankie wiped her hands on the rag. She'd rehearsed in 4 days several versions of this conversation, most of them sharper. She found she didn't want any of them. It's easy to stop seeing the people in the vests, she said. We're sort of designed to disappear. That's the job. You only notice us when something's wrong, and by then you've decided we're the thing that's wrong because we're the ones making noise. She shrugged. Your man's not a bad guy. He's just real good at the wrong half of his job. Somebody should teach him the other half. The half where the danger isn't always a person. Voss was quiet. Then he quit. Wade, 2 days ago, said he couldn't work for somebody who'd, he stopped. It doesn't matter. He's a serious man. He took it serious. He took something out of his jacket, a card, and held it out, and when she didn't take it right away, he set it on the toolbox between them. You were Navy, aviation structural. I had someone look. A and P now. I let the ratings I could keep. Ours are better for, she didn't finish it, but the crayon airplane finished it for her. For your son. For my son. There's a maintenance operation I have a stake in. 2 fields over. They are desperate constantly for people who can do what you did with that valve, which as I understand it is a thing most people with your tickets can do, and a thing almost nobody actually does, which is look. He nodded at the card. Day shift. Real money. The kind where you stop checking tugs that don't need checking. A flicker of something that might in a few years become humor. I'm not doing it because I feel bad in case that's what you're thinking. I run a logistics company. I have just been shown, very expensively, what it costs to put the wrong person at the gate and the right person behind a line. I'm correcting an allocation error. You can be insulted by that if you want. The job's still real. She picked up the card. She didn't say yes. She didn't say no. She'd learned a long time ago not to hand anyone an answer they hadn't earned the wait for. I'll think about it, she said, and meant it. And Voss nodded like a man who understood that a person who wouldn't be rushed was exactly the person he just decided he wanted, and left without making it more than it was. She took the job eventually, but that's not the part she keeps either. The part she keeps is a Saturday, weeks on, at the fence by the run-up area at Easton, where the chain link is worn shiny at one spot from all the small hands that have gripped it to watch. Jonah had his fingers hooked through the links. His whole body leaned into it, and a citation was holding short of the runway with its engine spooling, and he was telling her things about it, a torrent of facts, the way he did, half of them right and all of them delivered like scripture. That one's got 2 engines on the back, he said, and ours at the field has the big one. It's not ours, Bug. The big asterisk Gulfstream, it's basically ours. You saved it. He said it without looking away from the runway, the simple economy of an 8-year-old's accounting. You saved it, a fact filed next to the number of engines and the color of the tail. Mrs. Adami said you stopped a plane from blowing up. Mrs. Adami talks too much. Did you, though? The citation rolled, gathered, lifted, climbed out over the river into a sky going gold at the edges, and they watched it the way they always watched. The boy rapped, the woman with her hand resting between his shoulder blades where she could feel his heart going fast just from the thrill of the thing leaving the ground. There was a problem, she said, and I was close enough to fix it, and I wasn't too proud or too polite to make a scene about it. That's the whole story. People want it to be braver than that. It isn't. It's just somebody decided to look at the ground. Jonah considered this with his fierce, small seriousness. When I'm big, he said, I'm going to fly them. Yeah. And you can be the one who looks at the ground, so I don't blow up. Frankie laughed, surprised, the sound carrying out over the empty run-up pad. Out past the fence, the airplanes sat in their row in the morning light, beautiful and indifferent and full of fuel, kept whole and safe and boring by people in vests that nobody looked at twice. The ones who walk the ramp at dawn, who smell what doesn't belong, who get told to step back behind the line and step forward anyway. Deal, she said, and hooked her own fingers through the worn shiny links beside his, and the two of them stood there at the fence and watched the sky, the boy already gone up into it in his head, the mother keeping her eyes, the way she always had, the way she always would on the ground.